What's up? It's me, Mr. Robinson, and it's time for our next lecture on 4B5 Presidential Support Staff. So here we go. Uh, when I talk about the presidential staff, there's kind of two groups you talk about, the White House staff and the cabinet. The White House staff are the people that work with the president kind of on a daily basis that keep the gears running, such as the chief of staff, that kind of thing. You're going to notice it's a smaller group. These are the people that hang out with him in the Oval Office. Again, see a small group. This right here is Obama's, or was Obama's chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel. So it's a small group of advisors around the president. So let's begin. The executive office of the president, the White House staff, or the White House office. These are the immediate staff that surround the president, and they're literally very close to him on a daily basis, in very close proximity to the president. And they can serve in different ways. For example, FDR and Carter, kind of everything ran through the president. So there was a bunch of these little helpers, and they all would report to the president on a daily basis, like spokes. If the president was the middle of the wheel, and the spokes went out and all kind of talked to him. You can imagine this is a little bit more chaotic of a system to have. Then there's the more of the pyramid method used by Eisenhower, Nixon, and Reagan. And this is more like the only people talking to the president are those that are just below him, just a handful of people. And then the people below that handful report to them, and the people below that handful report to them, and so on. There are benefits and there are downfalls to both systems. Let's look at the benefits and downfalls. So the circular method, the one where everybody reports to the president, can be a little bit messy. It allows the president more access to information, but it's not very efficient. The president can become overworked or overwhelmed by the details of little things and lose sight of the bigger picture. I know I heard stories about Jimmy Carter, who used this method, staying up really late at night in the White House, like stressing out over paper, looking at papers and stuff, work that maybe he would have been better off delegating to somebody else on his staff instead. So the opposite of that approach is the pyramid method, and it allows for greater efficiency, but the president can become kind of cut off. Imagine the president now is only talking to two or three people about their opinions on a situation, instead of hearing from the whole group. And this can result in lots of different things. It can result in the president being kept in the dark, like scandals would happen under Reagan, and he would say, "I had no knowledge that this scandal was happening," and he was actually telling the truth, because the people never reported to him about it. Or you could end up with a Nixon situation where no one can really talk to him. And a result of this pyramid method is the president kind of lose touch with the nation. I think you kind of got that sense with George W. Bush a little bit towards the end, that he was maybe cut off from differing opinions. There's no one in the room to say, there's kind of a different opinion. Someone has a different opinion. Okay. These appointments, these people that work around the president in the White House office, like the chief of staff, they do not require the consent of the Senate, mostly, for the most part. And so these people are going to be very, very, very loyal to the president, and they're not going to have any difficulty, if it comes into a problem between Congress and the president. They're going to be on the president's side. All right, and a lot of them are even probably willing to lose their job in order to protect the president. So relying on a small circle of these staffers can result in problems like, for instance, George W. Bush was very optimistic about going to war in Iraq, but perhaps he needed to get some more opinions outside of his little circle, because the war would end up not being as easy as the White House staff had anticipated. Let's talk about little groups that are on the White House staff, just because you should know who they are. Notice that the one in bold here is at the top, the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB. They prepare the annual budget and review federal programs. We had questions I saw questions on the official AP previous tests asking, what does this group do? So they submit their idea of how much money the government is going to need to run. They submit that idea to Congress, and Congress can use that to shape exactly what their budget's going to look like for the year. Okay, that's what you need to know about them. Then there's also the National Security Council. You need to know these little shortenings OMB and NSC. All right, they coordinate foreign and military policy. All right, and we've seen this group grow in importance. Certainly, like for George W. Bush and that kind of thing, he relied on these people a lot. Then you have the Council of Economic Advisors. There's only 3 people on this council, and they give the president advice when it comes to how to run their economic policy. And then the Council on Environmental Quality, which is, it is what it sounds like, a group that's concerned for the rights of the environment and make sure that nothing's being ignored when it comes to that. Okay, moving on to kind of part 2 here is the White House cabinet. And just look at this picture, you notice the cabinet is a lot larger. All right, you have 15 different departments in the White House cabinet. Example is Department of State. You have Department of Education. You have all these people that are kind of heads of those departments, and the loyalties here become a little bit more conflicted. And when you see the cabinet in the White House, you often see them sitting at this table. All right, so if you see the president on TV at the table, that means he's meeting with his cabinet. And these meetings do not happen that frequently. At least not as frequent as the White House staff. White House staff meets and talks with the president on a daily basis. Cabinet, not so much. All right, so the heads of the cabinet departments, and then there's also 5 more other people that hold cabinet rank, like the UN ambassador and US trade representative. For instance, this woman right here was the UN ambassador, and she is not technically the head of a department, but she is cabinet level, and so she appears at the meetings. Now these positions are all going to be approved by the Senate, so the president will have to submit them, and they'll need to get approval. And some of them, it can be tricky to get approval for them. In a parliamentary system like England or France, the people that work in the cabinet are also members of the Congress or the Parliament. And the cabinet meets all the time, and they want to figure out solutions. And there's going to be people on the left in the meeting and people on the right in that meeting, but they want to hammer out public policy. Now, the way that we handle our cabinet is different. In our system, when Obama appoints you to the cabinet, you have to quit your current job. So if you are a senator or a House rep, you have to quit that job. And our cabinet does not meet regularly. They only meet at the call of the president. And because the president appoints them, they're going to be much more partisan. They're going to, if you have a Democrat president, they're more likely to be a Democrat. If you have a Republican president, they're more likely to be a Republican. I think it's like 85% of the time they're going to match the president's party. Where you can see in the British system, they would be mixed party, and that would mean maybe they'd have to do a little more compromising to get stuff done. All right. Now these cabinet officials, if I'm the Secretary of Education, so I'm in charge of the Department of Education, there's going to be some conflict there. Obama picked me to be his Secretary of Education, but I might have some divided loyalty. A lot of times the president wants to cut the budget of certain things in order to, reduce taxes or something. So if a president cuts the budget of my department, that's going to make me upset. What do I want more than anything? I want to expand my department probably. And so that means I'm kind of kissing up to Congress. I'm kissing up to the president. I'm kissing up to interest groups like schools and states across the nation that want my money. I'm kissing up to employees in my department who want to see the department grow. Okay, so the point of what I'm saying here is that a secretary of a department, even though he's appointed by the president or she's appointed by the president, they're going to have some divided loyalties. All right, they're going to have some divided loyalties, and they're probably going to want to see the department grow, while a lot of presidents maybe don't want to see the departments grow. So that's pretty much what I just said there. The president wants to cut spending, but the cabinet usually does not. When a president is running for election, they often say, I'm going to hand off a lot of responsibility to my cabinet because they know what's best. And then they become president and they realize that the cabinet ideas often conflict with the ideas that they want to have. All right. Presidential influence over the cabinet is kind of limited. Presidents can fire these people that they make in charge of the head of the cabinet. But in terms of other stuff, like we're talking like for the Department of Education, there are thousands and thousands of workers that work for the government, that work in the Department of Education or Homeland Security or whatever it might be, Department of Labor, and the president can't really fire all these people. At least that would be really unreasonable. So changing the head of a department, okay, that's going to happen. Changing an entire department and all the people, that is not going to happen. So their influence over the cabinet can be kind of limited. Whenever a president is picking a cabinet secretary, so they're called secretaries, these people in the picture, these are secretaries of the cabinet, like Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, or at least she was. Okay, when he's picking these people, he's going to look at different factors, like party affiliation. Obama's a Democrat, so he's going to want probably someone that's a Democrat to head that department. He's going to look for diversity, or she's going to look for diversity, so they're going to want to make sure that they pick somebody. Well, it depends on the president, but most presidents are going to want to look and see, do they have a diverse cabinet? Do they have women in there? Do they have minorities in there? Do they have people from the South and the North and the West and the East in there? Number 3 is confirmability. How likely is it if I select this person, are they going to be confirmed by the Senate and actually get to do their job? Some of the more risky picks don't get confirmed. I only have a brief memory of this, but Obama recently wanted to appoint somebody to head the banking system, and he was unable to do that because the pick that he had was too extreme, and so he had to give up on the pick that he wanted and settle for somebody else. I think her name is Yellen, Janet Yellen or something like that. She's the new, soon-to-be head of the banks, and because she's more confirmable. And then interest group influence is somebody going to complain about the person that I'm picking. Or is the interest group going to recommend somebody else? Alright, who gets appointed to federal positions? As mentioned, the number of appointments is large, but the percentage of appointed positions in the government is small, less than 10%. Presidents often do not know their appointees well. They depend heavily on staff recommendations. Okay, so you'd have to know thousands of people to fill in some of these positions. And so your staff does the research for you, and they say, we recommend this person for the job. And then the president says, okay, that sounds good. When they're looking at these appointees, they're going to see, do these people have experience working for the government? Or have they been in and out of working for the government? Do they work for the private sector and the public sector? Are they switching in between? That kind of thing. Again, talking about the vice president, we've talked about him before. He only has 2 constitutional duties. It's the most boring job in America. He's there to become president or become acting president if the president's seat is vacant, and he's there to preside over the Senate, voting only in case of ties, so he's not really there on a daily basis. Traditionally, what is the job of vice president? It's a dull, do-nothing job. The vice presidency, these are some quotes. The vice presidency isn't worth a pitcher of warm spit. The most insignificant office ever conceived. I think John Adams was our first vice president. And I do not choose to be buried until I'm really dead. This is Daniel Webster refusing the vice presidential nomination in 1848. So it's not a position where you get to really do a whole lot. But we have seen its power increase in the recent years, mostly because of the choice of our recent presidents. So the job of vice president is basically what the president says it is. It's up to the president how big that job's going to be. In the past, this has been kind of boring, unappealing work. Like, they get sent to funerals if a foreign leader dies. That actually just happened. What's his name? Sharon in Israel died, and Biden went to his funeral, but Obama did not. The vice president, we've talked before in class, is often picked because he balances the ticket. Maybe the guy running for president is not a very religious man, like George H.W. Bush, so he selects Dan Quayle, somebody who is more religious, that gets the Christian conservatives excited. Maybe our president's young, like Obama, and inexperienced, so he selects, what's his name? He selects Joe Biden to be his vice president because Biden's older, more experienced, and has a lot of foreign policy. Maybe it's geographical. JFK is a Democrat. He selects Lyndon Johnson from Texas, huge Republican state, to kind of swing some voters in his direction. So a lot of it has to do with politics, why these people are chosen. But the vice presidential office is important. 9 of our presidents have not finished their terms in office. Um, and the vice president does need to be there in case the president is disabled. And in recent years, Carter, Reagan, Clinton, they've made more effective use of the vice president. They actually had the vice president doing important things. Perhaps the biggest example ever is George W. Bush with Cheney. Cheney was almost seen as an equal in Bush's eyes, at least for much of his term. Um, and he got a lot of input on what they were going to do. And the vice presidency can be a stepping stone into the presidency. We have seen Ronald Reagan's vice president, George H.W. Bush, became president right after Reagan left. But it doesn't always work. Bill Clinton's vice president, Al Gore, didn't quite win the election of 2000, and so it's not a guaranteed in. Just like in a couple years, we'll probably see Joe Biden run against Hillary Clinton, and I would, in that matchup, perhaps favor Hillary Clinton to defeat Biden. So it's not a guaranteed that you're going to become the president. Oh my gosh, we're done. Sorry, no jokes today. I just want to finish the notes as soon as possible. But why don't you look at my pretty background, and I'll play a little music for you as you leave.